Welcome in to Chatterbox Bengals. It is the eve of the schedule release, but a lot more going on in Bengals country than we'd like. We got Shemar and T done earlier this offseason, and we said, hey, we're going to have a quiet and easy offseason, right? We're going to glide through training camp with no problems. Well, here we are, and Trey Hendrickson showed up to practice today, but we were rewarded with a 23-minute media session and basically just bashing the Bengals. I've said my piece on the ordeal. Craig, we're getting into the offseason now. Where do you stand with the Trey Hendrickson debacle?
Well, first of all, what kind of insanity was it to allow Trey to come to practice and to speak to the media for 23 minutes while practice was going on? It's not even like he went back to the media room after practice was over to address it. No, he just stood there on the sidelines while the guys were running drills in the background and talked to the media for 23 minutes. I thought it was pretty crazy, to be honest with you. And I think the biggest news piece that came out of it was the fact that Zach Taylor, a full month before mandatory summer workouts, sent a text message to Trey Hendrickson basically threatening him with fines if he didn't show up. We don't know what that text message said. If it was, hey, man, I hope we can get this done, but just remember, like, we're forced to fine you if you don't come. But, like, isn't that something that happens the couple days before, not necessarily a month before? I take Trey's side on that piece where it certainly feels like, okay, well, clearly you don't think this is getting done between now and then. Otherwise, why would you be sending it? But look, I think here's the thing is that Trey Hendrickson is scheduled to make somewhere in the range of $16 million this year. And his quote unquote open market value is probably double that.
Absolutely.
And the change in the market at the defensive end over the last year even has been crazy.
Right.
I mean, you look at the deal. I mean, Trey Hendrickson just signed this extension 2 years ago, basically. And now he's at this point now where he's basically threatening holding out or retiring for the last 2 years. And I think the trouble here is that you see both sides. Certainly the whole look, we're in the last year of a contract. You signed that contract, but we also just saw you renegotiate a contract where you reduce Geno Stone's salary, but you don't want to then renegotiate my contract and reward me for the work that I did. That's the problem I have, is that everybody looks at this as a business and business decisions and all of these things, but it goes both ways. And if you're going to be that organization that's going to force somebody to renegotiate a contract because they perform poorly, then you also need to be that organization that's willing to reward that. It sounds like the biggest hurdle at this point is the number of years. And I understand that piece. And I think that's the part that ultimately may lead to this not getting done, if we're being brutally honest, because if Trey wants a 4-year, 5-year deal, that's never happening. And I wouldn't blame the Bengals for that one bit. If he's looking for a 2 or 3 year deal and he just wants to be in Cincinnati through 2028, maybe 2027, even, maybe that's a different story. You know, we talk about it on Chatterbox Reds all the time, where Nick is a proponent of short-term, high-risk contracts are a lot easier to eat than these long-term contracts that tie you up for years to come. So I get it from both sides, and that's the frustrating part, is that both sides have valid arguments. And I saw a number of Twitter polls today where people were asking, whose side are you on? And it was pretty split throughout the day, where it felt like people were seeing both sides of it. And ultimately, I don't agree with how Trey is necessarily going about it in terms of the media and everything else. But if the reports are true that he literally hasn't heard from the Bengals in a month, what's he going to do? You know, he's got to do something. So at this point, he felt like this was the best decision for him. Will it work out in the long run? I guess that we'll have to wait and see what happens when time gets here in August. You know, at this point, we're really not going to have an answer until the season starts.
Right. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from today. And I don't even know if that's new news, that this is not going to get resolved anytime soon. These two sides are very far apart. I don't think the Bengals have any desire to trade Trey Hendrickson for some kind of 2026 draft capital. If they were going to do that, they would have done it before the draft a few weeks ago. Trey Hendrickson is going to be a Bengal this season, and I guess the question at this point is he on the field? And I go back to really every holdout that we've seen threatened in NFL history, with the exception of Le'Veon Bell, and come away saying yes. He said today to the media that he will not play under this 1-year, $21 million contract. He said he does not want to kick the can down the road with short-term deals, and he thinks that'll put them in the same position as they were in 22. And, quote, both parties should understand long-term contracts are about mutual respect. I understand all of that. But I also understand that the Bengals are getting vilified right now for something that we killed them for with Shemar and T all offseason last offseason. They got a contract done with a star player early and locked him up for future years at a price point that is now to their advantage. And now because Trey wants to be paid like the top edge rusher, he should be paid like the top edge rusher? If that's a 1 or 2 year deal that's in the best interest for both parties, I certainly agree, but I don't think it benefits the Bengals to extend Trey Hendrickson to his age 34, age 35 season at a $33+ million a year number. That doesn't seem like a great way to build a team. And he said in a quote today that you're asking a lot to carry the 27th ranked defense. Well, that was with you, Trey. There's only 5 spots below you. I don't know if I'm willing to give you $33 million. So if there's a 1 or 2 year deal in the mix, which it sounds like from both sides the Bengals are interested in offering, then I think that's in the best camp for both parties. Is it not? Trey Hendrickson gets rewarded for his play in these next year or two. The Bengals keep their star edge rusher in their Super Bowl window, and then Trey Hendrickson can test his value on the market.
Can you put into a contract that you agree not to franchise tag a player?
Yes.
Okay, because I think it sounded like Trey brought that up a couple times today about franchise tagging, and he was concerned that he would play out this contract and then be franchise tagged. The franchise tag would be in that $30+ million range based on the top salaries at that position at this point. So he would get paid at that point. But the problem is he knows as well as everybody else that now that he's over 30 years old, people view him differently. And if you kick the can down the road and you have him play out this year, then you franchise tag him next year, all of a sudden he's 33 years old trying to find another contract, and that stability is gone. The problem is, from the Bengals' perspective, I don't want to have you under contract making $35 million a year in your age 33 season either.
Right.
So it's that catch-22 where you're almost at this kind of age in your career where there is no real winning here, because Trey's not going to get what he wants from anybody. The Bengals aren't going to get what they want from Trey. And so you're stuck in this limbo where neither person is happy. But the problem is, from Trey's perspective, and going back to your question and point about whether or not he plays, Trey can't sit out this year and then hope that teams value him enough next year that they're willing to give him a multi-year $30+ million deal at that point after sitting out an entire year at your over age 30 season. That's never going to happen either. And so we allowed him to go out and try to explore his value by looking for a trade. The Bengals couldn't find what they were looking for there. We don't know exactly what it would have taken to get done, but it certainly feels like at this point that deal is not going to get done since the draft is passed and draft picks would have most likely had to have been involved. So I don't know what's next for Trey Hendrickson. At this point, it feels like it's going to be yet another media circus all throughout the summer, which was a big distraction going into the last couple seasons. And it feels like, despite Zach Taylor's emphasis on trying to start fast, here we are again, where distractions are going to take up the entire summer. Trey Hendrickson this time seems to be the leading candidate for what that distraction will be. Hopefully there's not anything else that comes up between now and then, but it's hard to imagine this team getting off to a hot start with the distractions that are happening, plus with what we think we know about the upcoming schedule.
That's right. And look at you, a professional of all professionals, with a phenomenal segue for what the real reason we were hopping on tonight to talk to you guys about before Trey Hendrickson went on his escapade today at practice. The 2025 schedule is released tomorrow, and the Bengals are always one of those teams that are comfortably in the mix for that maximum number of primetime games. We saw it last year, even at just 9 wins on the season. The Bengals were consistently slotted into those positions late in the year in those TBD games, and I expect it to be more of the same this year. Those week 15, 16, 17, 18 games for the Bengals, I would expect at least half of them to be determined when it comes to day and even time, because they're going to put those games in primetime if they have any ability to with Joe Burrow. And I think the biggest question most Bengals fans are asking about is, who are we going to get to see in primetime at home? The Bengals have been screwed over the last couple of years with AFC North primetime games on the road. I hope we get one back this year, Craig. Are you optimistic?
I am. I actually have the Bengals getting 2 home primetime AFC North games this year. We kind of did this exercise where we went through the schedule and tried to identify what games we thought would be primetime games, what kind of themes might go with those games for the home games. I have both the Ravens and the Browns at home in primetime in 2025, Jacob.
I love that. I personally know that I can't handle another primetime trip to M&T Bank. That over the last 2 years has put me through an emotional ringer. So if we get the Ravens in primetime, it better be here. And after the last 2 games last year, those games are absolutely going to be primetime.
What if I told you I think they put both of those games on primetime, the home and the away game?
Do you think those are both listed as primetime tomorrow night? Or do you think one of those are TBD in the late weeks of the season?
Well, there's rumblings that the Bengals are going to be a Thanksgiving night game this year. What better way to celebrate Thanksgiving after eating a big meal than sitting down and watching Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson put on an absolute show on Thursday night after Thanksgiving?
And after some of the standalone stinkers in the holiday season last year, the NFL, play it safe. Put the 2 quarterbacks that gave you 1,000 yards in 2 matchups last year against each other. I think easily an answer for that home stripe game or maybe whiteout game would be that Ravens game. If it's the primetime home game in the AFC North, that certainly gets the nod for one of those 2. Will the Bengals bring back their home opener theme from last year this season? Do you expect the Bengals to open in orange again in 2025? And who do you think that opening home game is going to be?
That's a good question. I do think that the open in orange will happen. They did it last year against the Patriots. I have no doubt. It feels like the one thing we can say about Katie Blackburn and this marketing efforts that have taken place ever since she kind of took over that side is that the marketing efforts have been significantly increased. So I have no doubt that will continue. I actually expect them to try and space out even more, try and get even more out there. Last year, if I remember correctly, the Ring of Honor night was also a whiteout night. I expect them to maybe separate those out and do a Ring of Honor night and a whiteout separately. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Bengals open at home against the Arizona Cardinals in a day game.
Certainly.
Open in orange.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. The Cardinals, Ja'Marr Chase, if I remember correctly, went nuclear in Arizona the last time the Bengals played the Cardinals. Franchise record in receptions in that game. So certainly would be a good home opener for the Bengals. You mentioned the Browns as a potential primetime opponent when they come to Cincinnati. Is that game late enough in the season that it's Sanders versus Burrow?
That's a good question. In my initial kind of planning here, I had the Browns as an earlier Thursday night football game at home, a Ring of Honor evening.
Okay.
So in that scenario, probably wouldn't be Shedeur Sanders yet, but it's definitely a possibility that it's later in the season. My gut says that that is not the case, but that the Cleveland game in week 18 may be a flex game where Shedeur at that point is starting, and maybe they flex Shedeur and Burrow that last week if the Browns are even in competition at that point. I think that's the biggest challenge for the Cleveland game, for any Cleveland game getting into prime time, is that, quite frankly, there's not a lot of hope for Cleveland this year.
No.
So I think it'll be one of those like flex games where they have the option to flex it, but I think it'll be so late in the season that the Browns will already be out of the picture that it probably doesn't happen.
There has been some rumors circulating, not about the home schedule, but about these primetime games that the Bengals could potentially kick the season off, not opening in orange, not at home, but on the road at Highmark Stadium in Buffalo on Sunday Night Football to start the year. Obviously, that's not confirmed. We will find out tomorrow night where the Bengals open the season in week 1. But Josh Allen versus Joe Burrow in primetime week 1 of the NFL season seems like a perfect recipe for me. That would be an unbelievable game to get the juices flowing for the 2025 season, and I think both fan bases would be ecstatic about that matchup in week 1. I know some Bengals fans will be nervous. You get a good team in week 1, you're probably going to lose that game. We don't start too fast all the time, but get it out of the way early. Prove that we're doing something different this year. We're going to come out and play good football week 1. I love a primetime matchup against Josh Allen and the Bills in week 1, even though it would be on the road.
Yeah, I mean, super excited about it. Obviously, the last time these two teams, I'm certain it's real. The last time these two teams met, Joe Burrow outshined Josh Allen. He threw 31 of 44 for 348 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Josh Allen on the other side, 26 of 38, 258 through the air, 1 touchdown and an interception. Josh Allen did run 8 times for 44 yards and a touchdown. There's no doubt that that is one of, if not the biggest premier quarterback matchup outside of Burrow versus Lamar Jackson this year. So it would make total sense for them to start the season highlighting that game after. I think the Thursday night game will be the Super Bowl rematch or whatever they normally do or try to do, but makes total sense to highlight that matchup. They put out a highlight video of the last time the Bengals and the Bills met on social media already. So clearly they're trying to build that hype. And I think if I remember correctly, they put out a video of the last 2 times now that Burrow and Lamar met.
They did.
Trying to build up that hype. So that's kind of what led me to the Ravens and Bengals being on primetime both games, is that there's very clear desire from the NFL side to build up that matchup.
That puts us at 4 primetime games. That leaves 2 slots for the Cincinnati Bengals, and we have differing opinions on where this last one might go. I don't think there's another obvious answer, taking away the divisional matchups, and you got the Bills taken care of, maybe because last year's game against the Broncos was so elite late in the year. We could have a similar situation where these two teams are fighting for playoff positioning in a packed AFC, and you have that late in the season. But in terms of being announced tomorrow night, Craig, of these home games, which one do you think might be a shocker that we get in primetime?
Yeah, last year the shocker was the Bengals against the Commanders.
That's right.
Dan Quinn's first season as head coach of the Commanders, new quarterback with Jaden Daniels, obviously. So I'm going to follow that similar trend line here and say that the Bengals hosting the Chicago Bears and first-year head coach Ben Johnson with young quarterback Caleb Williams ends up being a primetime game, probably a Thursday night football game, but prime time nonetheless. That is my whiteout game this year. Last year, they paired the Bengals with the Commanders, trying to elevate the young QB and the new head coach. They do it again this year with the Chicago Bears. What about you?
My shocker also comes at home, and it's also my whiteout game, and it's a team we've whited out against multiple times before. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are getting thrown in primetime in Cincinnati. And I know they're not a team that's going to be necessarily fighting for the AFC playoffs or anything too special this year in terms of win totals, but they took someone at 2nd overall I think the NFL is going to be interested in throwing into the limelight. I would fully expect Travis Hunter and the Jacksonville Jaguars to get at least a few primetime games this year. And what's a better excuse than to throw them against Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense when you know exactly what you're get. Even if the Jags put up a stinker, the Bengals offense will be entertaining enough that it'll be a fun game to watch for the fans across the country in a primetime game. So I think they search that Jags schedule to find the opponents that maybe don't come for the best game, but ensure it's a good product, and you can still throw Travis Hunter in that primetime slot. I think the Jags would be a fun one for the Bengals to have in primetime here. And we've seen the Whites before, and we've had success in the whiteouts against the Jags. So I'd be all for that one.
My last thought on, and this isn't a surprise of what will be on primetime, but I don't have either Pittsburgh game being in primetime this year, which I think just given their quarterback situation and just expectations for the Steelers might be a shock for some. I just don't expect that matchup either time to be in primetime this year.
Aaron Rodgers has not signed with the Steelers and will not sign with the Steelers tomorrow. Maybe he does at some point down the line. We will know if Aaron Rodgers is quarterbacking the Steelers at about 8 o'clock tomorrow night. If the Steelers are given 4, 5, 6 primetime games, that's not for Mason Rudolph. So connect those dots. Keep an eye on the Pittsburgh Steelers. If the Bengals are playing the Steelers in primetime in the middle of the season, or really at all, I would think Aaron Rodgers is on his way to the Steel City. I don't know. But the way the Steelers have handled themselves this offseason, that draft, and really all the conversation around them, it just feels like everyone inside of that facility knows he's coming. And whether he does and when he does is just more of a clock than anything else. And I think that'll probably be reflected by the Steelers getting more primetime games than Mason Rudolph deserves. But we'll certainly see tomorrow night. And right after that's done, we'll be right back with you to break down the Bengals schedule where we know where these opponents slot in. We'll get the week numbers, and we'll give you an official record prediction of this team almost certainly making it back to the playoffs. If you're not going to be optimistic in the offseason, when can you be? Thanks for tuning in to Chatterbox Bengals. Craig Sandlin, Jacob Tissett. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Who dey?